Ms. Whitaker stood in front of the blackboard, her blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun, her piercing blue eyes scanning the classroom with the confidence of someone who believed she knew everything. She had been teaching at Westfield High for 7 years, and in that time, she had developed a reputation for being strict, especially toward students like Jamal Carter. A 16-year-old black boy with a quiet demeanor, Jamal often kept to himself, his sharp mind hidden behind an expression of indifference. Ms. Whitaker had made up her mind about him long ago, another lazy student with no ambition. "Jamal," she said, her voice sharp, interrupting his quiet scribbling in his notebook. He looked up, his dark eyes neutral. "Come solve this equation on the board." Jamal glanced at the problem she had just written. A multivariable calculus equation, one that most students in the class wouldn't have a clue how to approach. He knew why she called on him. She expected him to fail. He could hear the suppressed giggles from a few students, the quiet whispers. He sighed and stood up, his lanky frame moving with measured steps toward the front of the room. Ms. Whitaker smirked slightly, crossing her arms. "Take your time," she said. "We'll wait." She turned to the class, as if to say, "Watch this." Jamal picked up the chalk, his fingers steady, and examined the equation. It was complicated, sure, but not impossible. In fact, he recognized it as a variation of a problem he had solved months ago in one of the advanced mathematics books he read for fun. Without hesitation, he began to write, his strokes confident, the chalk gliding across the board as he filled in the first step. The class fell silent. Ms. Whitaker's smirk faded slightly as she watched him. He wasn't hesitating. He wasn't making mistakes. Step by step, Jamal broke down the problem with a precision that most college students would struggle to match. His mind worked at an incredible speed, calculating, simplifying, solving. Within minutes, he had reached the answer. He put the chalk down and stepped back. The answer was correct. Ms. Whitaker blinked, her mouth slightly open, as if her mind was struggling to process what had just happened. The class remained frozen, eyes darting between Jamal and the board. No one had expected this. Jamal turned to face her. "Anything else?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with something sharper. Ms. Whitaker hesitated. She felt the control slipping from her grip, the very moment she had crafted turning against her. "Well," she cleared her throat, reaching for some way to regain authority. "Lucky guess, I suppose." Jamal's lips pressed together in a knowing smirk. "No luck involved," he said simply. He walked back to his seat, his movements just as measured as before, but this time, there was a weight behind them, a silent victory. A murmur spread through the classroom. Some students exchanged looks, others stared at Jamal as if seeing him for the first time. Even those who had laughed at him moments before were now whispering in hushed tones. He had just done something none of them could do. Ms. Whitaker turned to the board, erasing the answer with more force than necessary. "All right, let's move on," she said briskly, but the authority in her voice had dimmed. Jamal leaned back in his seat, his mind already moving past the incident. He had nothing to prove to her, or to anyone else in the room. Yet, something about her reaction unsettled him. It wasn't just surprise, it was something deeper, something bitter. He had embarrassed her without meaning to, and he knew people like Ms. Whitaker didn't take well to being proven wrong. Class continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Ms. Whitaker avoided calling on Jamal for the rest of the period, and every now and then, he caught her sneaking glances at him, as if trying to figure him out. When the bell rang, students filed out, but Jamal took his time packing his things. As he moved toward the door, Ms. Whitaker's voice stopped him. "Jamal," a word. He turned, meeting her gaze. Her expression was unreadable now, a mixture of forced neutrality and something else, something unreadable. He could already guess where this was going. "You've been holding back," she said. It wasn't a question. Jamal shrugged. "Maybe." Her jaw tightened. "Why?" He studied her, debating how much to say. Finally, he answered, "Because people like you don't expect people like me to be good at this." Ms. Whitaker inhaled sharply. "That's not true," she said, but even she didn't sound convinced. Jamal smiled faintly, a knowing expression. "Whatever you say, Ms. Whitaker." Without another word, he walked out of the classroom, leaving her standing there, her mind racing. She had set a trap for him, and somehow, she had fallen into it instead. Ms. Whitaker sat at her desk long after the classroom had emptied, staring at the problem Jamal had solved so effortlessly. The smooth precision of his handwriting, the clarity of his logic, it all mocked her assumptions. She prided herself on being an educator, on shaping young minds, but had she let her own biases cloud her judgment? The thought unsettled her. She had tried to humiliate Jamal, but instead, he had humbled her. That night, she couldn't shake the moment from her mind. Lying in bed, she replayed his quiet confidence, his piercing words, "Because people like you don't expect people like me to be good at this." It stung because it was true. She had underestimated him, boxed him into a stereotype. Was she really the kind of teacher she claimed to be? The realization sat heavy in her chest. The next day, Jamal walked into class as usual, but something was different. Whispers followed him, the equation on the board still fresh in everyone's minds. He wasn't just the quiet kid anymore, he was the genius, the one who had made their teacher falter. Some students looked at him with admiration, others with envy. Jamal ignored them all, taking his usual seat at the back. Ms. Whitaker cleared her throat as she addressed the class. "Before we begin, I want to acknowledge something," she said, her voice steady. "Yesterday, Jamal solved a problem that was beyond the level of this class. And I made a mistake, I underestimated him. That won't happen again." A few students exchanged glances, surprised at her honesty. Jamal looked up, meeting her gaze. He wasn't expecting an apology, not outright, but this was close. He gave a small nod, acknowledging the gesture, but said nothing. He wasn't one for unnecessary words. After class, Ms. Whitaker hesitated as Jamal packed his bag. For the first time, she didn't see him as just another student. She saw potential, brilliance, something rare. She didn't know much about his life outside of school, but she wanted to. "Jamal," she called softly. He looked at her warily. "Yeah. Can I ask you something?" She hesitated, then added, not as a teacher, but as someone who genuinely wants to understand. Jamal raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Go ahead. When did you realize you were this good at math?" He studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Always been like this. Numbers make sense. They don't lie, don't judge. Just follow the rules, and they work." Her chest tightened at his words. "But you don't always show it in class." Jamal smirked. "Why would I? People treat you different when they know you're smart. Sometimes it's easier to let them think you're just average." She frowned. "That's not fair to you." He laughed softly. "Life's not fair, Ms. Whitaker. You of all people should know that." She swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing into her. "But you deserve more than this class, Jamal. More than Westfield High. Have you thought about applying to advanced programs? Scholarships?" Jamal exhaled, his fingers tightening around his bag strap. "Yeah. My mom wanted me to. But those programs aren't cheap. And with my dad gone. She works 2 jobs just to keep the lights on." A lump formed in Ms. Whitaker's throat. She had assumed so much about him but had never considered the battles he fought outside of school. "Jamal," she said carefully, "you have something rare. You shouldn't have to dim your light because the world isn't ready for it." For the first time, something flickered in Jamal's eyes, something vulnerable. "It's not that simple," he murmured. Ms. Whitaker nodded. "I know. But if I can help, if there's anything I can do, will you let me?" Jamal studied her for a long moment, searching for any trace of insincerity. Finally, he gave a small nod. "Maybe." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ms. Whitaker felt something shift between them, not just student and teacher, but 2 people learning from each other. For the first time, she wasn't just teaching, she was listening. Jamal walked home that afternoon, his thoughts tangled. He had expected Ms. Whitaker to brush past what happened, maybe even double down on her usual attitude. But she hadn't. Instead, she had listened. She had admitted she was wrong. Adults never did that. It felt strange. He had spent so long assuming teachers like her saw him as just another statistic, another black boy expected to struggle, to fail. But now, for the first time, he wondered, what if she actually wanted to help? At home, the apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of his mother moving in the kitchen. Jamal dropped his bag and found her balancing a pile of unpaid bills, her face tight with exhaustion. "Hey Ma," he said, pulling up a chair. She looked up and smiled, though it didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "Hey baby. How was school?" He hesitated. "Weird." She raised an eyebrow. Weird how? Jamal exhaled. My math teacher, Ms. Whitaker, she called me up to solve a problem. I think she was trying to embarrass me, but I solved it. Like fast. His mother smirked. And I think I messed with her head. She apologized. Said she underestimated me. He frowned. Then she asked if she could help me get into better programs. His mother set down the bills. And how do you feel about that? Jamal shrugged. I don't know. Feels different. Like she actually meant it. His mother reached over, squeezing his hand. People can surprise you, baby. Some learn, some don't. But if someone's willing to help you shine, don't dim your light out of habit. Jamal swallowed hard. His mother always knew what to say. The next day, Ms. Whitaker handed him a brochure before class started. This is the State Mathematics Scholars Program, she said quietly. It's competitive, but you could get in. There's financial aid too. Jamal turned it over in his hands. Why are you doing this? She sighed. Because I was wrong about you. And because I don't want my mistake to hold you back. Jamal studied her, then nodded. Okay. It wasn't just okay. It was a beginning. Jamal stared at the brochure long after Ms. Whitaker walked away. The words State Mathematics Scholars Program stood out like a beacon, both exciting and terrifying. He knew his mother would be proud, but he also knew what it meant. More pressure, more expectations. Part of him wanted to shove the paper in his bag and forget about it. But another part, a quiet, persistent voice inside him, told him this could be his chance. That night, he showed his mother the brochure. She ran her fingers over the glossy pages, eyes scanning the requirements. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. This is huge, baby, she said softly. Yeah, Jamal murmured. But what if I don't get in? His mother cupped his face. Jamal, you are not the kind of boy who lets fear stop him. You have a gift, and if they don't see that, it's their loss, not yours. Her words settled deep in his chest, warming the places where doubt had taken root. Okay, he whispered. I'll do it. The next day, Ms. Whitaker handed him a stack of practice problems. The application includes a qualifying test, she explained. It's tough, but I think you'll pass. Jamal smirked. You think? She chuckled. Fine. I know you'll pass. For the first time, Jamal felt something unexpected. He trusted her. As weeks passed, Ms. Whitaker became more than just a teacher. She became a mentor. She stayed after school, helping him refine his problem-solving techniques, pushing him harder than any teacher ever had. Jamal soaked it up, his mind thriving under the challenge. But just as things were looking up, life had a way of reminding him that nothing came easy. One evening, he walked into the apartment and found his mother sitting at the kitchen table, a letter in her trembling hands. The electricity bill lay open beside her, past due. Her eyes glistened, her shoulders tense. Ma. Jamal said carefully. What's wrong? She inhaled sharply, blinking back tears. Baby, her voice broke. I don't know if I can keep us here. Rent's going up, and I don't know. Jamal felt his stomach drop. They had struggled before, but this felt different, heavier, more final. His mother wiped her eyes quickly. Don't you worry about this, okay? You focus on that program. But how could he? How could he focus when their home was slipping through their fingers? The next day at school, he sat in front of his practice test, but the numbers blurred. For the first time, math didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a luxury. Ms. Whitaker noticed. Jamal, what's going on? He shook his head. Nothing. She didn't buy it. After class, she stopped him. This isn't just about math, is it? Jamal hesitated, then sighed. It's home. My mom's struggling. I don't know if we can even stay in our apartment. Ms. Whitaker's heart clenched. She had seen this before, brilliant students held back by circumstances beyond their control. But this time, she wasn't going to let it happen. She made a decision that night. She couldn't fix everything, but she could do something. The next day, she pulled Jamal aside. There's a full scholarship for the program, including housing for students in difficult situations. It's rare, but I called, and they'll consider you if you qualify. Jamal's eyes widened. Are you serious? She nodded. I believe in you, Jamal. But you have to believe in yourself, too. Jamal swallowed the lump in his throat. I'll do it, he whispered. The test day arrived. Jamal sat in the exam room, gripping his pencil. He wasn't just doing this for himself anymore. He was doing it for his mother, for their future. He took a deep breath and started writing. Jamal's pencil glided across the page, his mind sharp and focused. Each question was a challenge, but he welcomed it. Math had always been his refuge, a world where emotions didn't interfere, where logic reigned. He tackled complex integrals, multivariable equations, and probability theorems with precision. The clock ticked away, but he never rushed. He had learned that mastery wasn't about speed, it was about understanding. By the time he finished, he felt an odd sense of peace. He knew he had done his best. As he turned in his test, the proctor gave him a curious glance, as if sensing something extraordinary had just happened. Walking out of the exam room, he exhaled deeply. He wanted to believe Ms. Whitaker was right, that he was meant for more. That night, he sat beside his mother on their worn-out couch, telling her about the test. She listened intently, pride and exhaustion evident in her eyes. I know you did amazing, she said softly, running her fingers through his hair like she used to when he was little. No matter what happens, you keep pushing forward, okay? Jamal nodded, leaning into her warmth. I will, Ma. I promise. The waiting period was agonizing. Every day, Jamal checked his email, his stomach twisting in knots. He tried to act like it didn't matter, but it did. It mattered more than anything. Ms. Whitaker never pressured him, but she always gave him an encouraging smile, as if she knew something he didn't. Then one afternoon, his phone buzzed. The email subject read, State Mathematics Scholars Program, Results. His hands shook as he opened it. He scanned the words quickly, his heart pounding. Then he froze. Congratulations. You have been accepted into the program with a full scholarship, including housing and living expenses. We are honored to welcome a mind as brilliant as yours. Jamal stared at the screen, his vision blurring. He had done it. "M.A.," he shouted, bursting into the kitchen. His mother turned, startled. "I got in." He held up his phone, his voice breaking. Full scholarship. Everything. Tears filled her eyes as she covered her mouth. Then she pulled him into the tightest hug he'd ever felt. "Oh, baby. I knew it. I knew you would." They held each other, laughing and crying at the same time. For the first time in a long time, hope filled their home. At school, Ms. Whitaker was grading papers when Jamal walked in. He didn't say anything at first, just set the acceptance letter on her desk. She picked it up, reading the words carefully. Then she looked up, smiling. "I knew you could do it." Jamal exhaled, shaking his head. "I wasn't sure I could." She stood, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You just needed someone to remind you of what you were capable of." Word spread quickly. Suddenly, the quiet kid who had once been overlooked became a legend. Teachers whispered about him in the hallways. Students who had never spoken to him before suddenly wanted to know him. But Jamal stayed the same, focused, humble, determined. One day, as he packed up his locker, a younger black student approached him nervously. "Hey, I heard about you," the boy said. "They said you're a genius." Jamal smirked. "I just like math." The boy hesitated. "I like math too, but I don't know if I'm smart enough." Jamal studied him, remembering a time when he had doubted himself too. He tore a piece of paper from his notebook, quickly writing down some advanced problems. He handed it to the boy. "Try these. If you get stuck, come find me." The boy's eyes widened. "For real?" Jamal nodded. "Yeah. We gotta look out for each other, right?" The boy grinned. "Right." Ms. Whitaker watched the exchange from afar, her heart swelling. She had set out to teach Jamal, but in the end, he had taught her something greater. He had shattered expectations, not just for himself, but for the students who would come after him. Jamal Carter wasn't just a student anymore. He was a symbol of what was possible. Jamal arrived at the State Mathematics Scholars Program campus, feeling both excitement and nerves. He had never been away from home before, and the idea of living among some of the brightest students in the country was intimidating. But as he walked through the sleek glass doors of the math department, he reminded himself, "I belong here." Orientation was a whirlwind of introductions and lectures. Some students eyed him curiously, some with admiration, others with skepticism. He knew what they were thinking. How did a kid from a struggling neighborhood make it here? Jamal let them wonder. He was here to prove himself. His first week was tough. The coursework was intense, the expectations sky high. But he refused to be intimidated. He spent late nights poring over problems, pushing himself beyond his limits. Soon, the professors took notice. One day, Dr. Patel, a renowned mathematician, called him into her office. "Jamal, your approach to problem-solving is remarkable," she said, tapping a sheet of paper where he had solved an equation in an unconventional way. "Where did you learn to think like this?" Jamal shrugged. "Numbers always made sense to me. I just see patterns." Dr. Patel smiled. "You don't just see patterns. You create them. That's the mark of a true mathematician." The words struck something deep in him. No one had ever called him that before. Back home, his mother worked tirelessly, but things were getting better. With Jamal's scholarship covering his expenses, she could finally breathe. She started saving money, and for the first time, the possibility of moving to a better home didn't feel like a dream. She missed him fiercely, but every time they talked, she could hear the confidence growing in his voice. Ms. Whitaker followed his journey closely. She often checked in, feeling an immense pride in how far he had come. One afternoon, she received an email from him with the subject line, "Thank you." It read, "Ms. Whitaker, I just solved my first original theorem. I never would have gotten here if you hadn't believed in me. Thank you for seeing me when others didn't." Tears filled her eyes. She had set out to challenge him, and in the process, she had changed herself. Months turned into years, and Jamal flourished. He won national math competitions, published research papers, and even tutored struggling students in his free time. He never forgot where he came from. One day, he was invited to give a TED Talk titled "Breaking the Equation: The Power of Unseen Genius." Standing before a packed auditorium, he took a deep breath. "When I was younger, people saw me as just another kid from the wrong side of town," he began. "But numbers didn't care where I came from. They didn't judge me. And one teacher, despite her own doubts, chose to see me for who I really was." He paused, scanning the audience. "I am not an anomaly. There are thousands of kids like me, brilliant, curious, hungry for knowledge. The world just has to give them a chance." Applause thundered through the hall. Among the crowd, his mother wiped her tears. Ms. Whitaker sat beside her, her heart full. As Jamal stepped off the stage, he knew his journey wasn't just his own. He had opened doors, shattered ceilings, and rewritten the equation of what was possible. He was no longer just a boy who loved math. He was a force to be reckoned with. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to our channel. It helps to encourage us to create more life lesson video like this one. Subscribe to get notification whenever we upload a new video. And check out other real-life uplifting videos in our channel. Bye.